Welcome back, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Silver Slayer with my weekly show. Every single week, Andy Scheckman, the CEO of Miles Franklin, and I do this where we just talk silver, any updates, anything we want. I appreciate, and I'm sure Andy does as well, all the support we've been getting from this show. I know you guys really enjoy it, and I do as well. So, Andy, what is up? Anything new that you want to talk about?
Good to see you, buddy. Yeah, one of the things that I have found most interesting, Jay, about the times we're living in is the rapid escalation in narrative, the rapid escalation in the way things continue to unfold. And it's almost freaky to me. A lot of the things that I've been talking about for a few years based mostly upon logic about paying close attention to crumbs that are being dropped by the elite that they usually do that. They drop some crumbs and say, we told you, you just weren't paying close enough attention.
Mm,
Following the crumbs, following the logic, using a little bit of mathematics, a little bit of economics, and sprinkling of old school logic, and all of a sudden, the things that I've been talking about when no one was talking about, not only are they happening, they're escalating. And when it was one thing when a guy like myself was saying 2 years ago that you're going to see a digital currency that will be backed by gold that will emanate from the BRICS nations based upon gold being revalued tier one reserve status based upon the coalition of these countries that are all rallying against the dollar. I've been saying this ad nauseum for 2 years. And it was interesting to me to see Fox News pick this up this week. And on Monday, they say Russia, China may be preparing new gold backed currencies. Get this. But expert assures US dollar is still the safest currency today. So they're
today.
basically saying, yeah, it's coming. Now, this is a crumb, right? They drop a
Yep.
crumb. Most people don't see it, but they are coming out and acquiescing that, yeah, it looks like they're going to be preparing for a gold backed currency, but the dollar is still the safest today. Sure, it is. We can look at the narrative. I've been following first gold being reclassified a tier one liquid asset. And then I saw prior to that, actually, the front running of this decision by the massive acquisition of gold by the central banks, by the repatriation of gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. And we saw all of these things happening. We saw the Belt Road Initiative, this massive infrastructure project that is encompassing 70+% of human population in and of itself. And the gold that is being accumulated by the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, on top of all the countries that are joining in. It was just announced that in July, China purchased 80.1 tons of gold in July alone. And when you talk about the likelihood of this happening, I think it is becoming greater and greater and greater because if you look at who's been purchasing all the gold, it's the Asian nations, it's Russia, it's India, it's the nations that have expressed interest in joining BRICS. And I think that it's starting to happen at a much greater speed. This de-dollarization, this coalescing, if you will, against the Western hegemony. And it just seems to me that these countries are seeking to build their own sphere of influence, as the article talks about, that they are trying to stand up to the West. And the record amount of gold that China has been purchasing, the article says, has raised some eyebrows. And, the Swiss gold imports to China hit a 5-year high recently. And, you're talking in July, 80.1 tons of gold delivered to China worth just under $5 billion, double what they bought in June, 33 tons of gold. So they continue to buy and buy and buy. And I found it interesting that they also talk about it being a digital currency. Now, I talked about that for a long time because the Belt Road Initiative is all settling on the new digital yuan. And it's called a 4-year beta test. The digital yuan is going to be the rails by which the finance minister of Russia said they're going to peg this new currency system to commodities. And it's all starting to unfold. Now you're getting mainstream media talking about it.
Right.
And so I think it's starting to get to that point where things are going to get very real. And I think you can evidence this, the real part, by the massive bleed down of metals that we're seeing day in and day out. Now, the last time I talked with you, there were 36 million ounces of silver in the registered category. There is now under 34 million ounces of silver in the registered category. The registered category is being bled down. And, you know, when you talk about 50 million ounces were imported into India in September alone, um, you know, that's more than not only 35% of annual mine supply, but it's also more than the entire COMEX holds in the registered category, almost double what it's holding in the registered category. And so, you know, here again, we're seeing massive deliveries in gold and silver off of COMEX day by day by day, and out of the ETFs. One thing that's really interesting is that every single day lately, we have seen metal come out of the silver ETFs. And so, you know, to the tune of 1 to 2 million ounces every single day. In fact, just, I don't know, just a few days ago, I was reading an authorized participant took 2,578,000,000 ounces,
Jeez.
2,578,000 ounces out of SLV. And when you look at what happened on Wednesday alone of last week, according to Ed Steer, there was almost 60 million ounces of gold taken out of the ETFs and the exchanges, the Western exchanges, the LME and the COMEX, and almost 900,000 ounces of silver in one day. And this is what we see happening. And so put it all together.
Right.
You're seeing the smartest money in the world use price suppression to drain the shelves, not only of the LME, which is the lowest silver inventory since they started keeping record, but look at the registered category. There was 120 million of ounces of silver in the registered category during silver squeeze, and now we're down to 34. And you're talking a situation where the smart money is holding down the price with levered contracts and running away with all of the supply when no one's looking. And to add fuel to this, you have the commercial banks net long. You put it all together, the smartest money in the world is using price suppression to drain the shelves of all of the supply from every corner of the Western world. And the Eastern folks, well, they're wise to it too, because they're taking record deliveries. The Swiss are saying China's taking more imports of gold than ever. India's importing 50 million ounces of silver. They're all by Turkey bought more gold than any country on the planet the first 7 months of the year. You can see it's happening, and they're bleeding dry the exchanges, and prices being held down to misdirect people's assessment of reality. We have a perception of reality based upon manipulation of price that is allowing the smartest money in the world to reposition, but not just reposition into more debt instruments or derivatives. They're taking the real thing, and you can see it. And every day we're seeing 1 million or 2 million ounces coming out of SLV in deliveries by the authorized participants. It's getting crazy, man. And I think you add all of that together and then look at the supply in this industry and in the wholesale industry. And what you are seeing is the potential for the first time that I can really remember where maybe the physical demand overwhelms the paper suppression, because anyone in their right mind, like to manage money, that would be short in this environment when you can't find anything. I mean, supply is so tight right now, and it's being bled down off of COMEX. where in 1 month a country can take 1.5 times in deliveries, 1.5 times what is in the registered category. And if you put all of the metal together, which is eligible and registered, the eligible is not for sale, the registered is, you're talking a almost 300% paper to gold ratio, where there's 3 times the amount of paper, about 2.5 times the paper than there is the gold. You do the registered category only, which are the bars that can be delivered, it's almost 19 times more paper than gold. So 1 out of every 19 gets their silver, and 18 get the paper shaft. But long before that, the 18, I mean, they'd shut it down because we're this close to there being a real short squeeze, a real problem. And I don't know, it's getting interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the crumbs. This stuff is too ironic to be ironic. A lot of people are distracted in other directions, especially with the United States itself, just what we're dealing with, $30 trillion of debt. But I made a video the other day. Oxford Economics came out and mentioned that silver is the best investment right now. You should have at least 4 to 6%, and it is critical over the next 5 years. And it's mainstream now. People that never even really focused on silver are now starting to get the bigger picture. And you and I have been talking about this for years now, and it seems like people that maybe used to be a little biased or head in a different direction, whether it's stocks, they're all starting to say, even gold, even gold, we're starting to say, silver makes the most sense. And I think right now more than ever, especially when we're talking about the supply deficit. I've been talking about this shortage for years now as well, and I think now more than ever, we could see an actual collapse. Within that. And like you mentioned, I don't see how this facade could keep up too much longer before silver's true value. Big industry realizes it, not even just the investment sector. I know that day's coming, and I think the pandemic sped it up a little bit. But yeah, it's unbelievable to see what's happening right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's important to see what the biggest money is doing and not really what they're saying. And
Yeah.
that's where I think I take the most comfort in knowing that we are on the right path. And I'll tell you, supply is really becoming an issue. And I don't know what happens. They're saying that there's about 2 weeks of diesel fuel left in reserves, and that it's down to the lowest level we've had since like the 1940s in this country, diesel fuel. So when you talk about supply chain problems in general, exacerbating, look, precious metals are not immune to supply chain problems. And, we're seeing more and more things happen that just make you have to pause for a moment. Um, you can look closer to home and you can see the Federal Reserve. We got the FOMC meeting coming out here in a few days, where they're expected to raise rates again by 75 basis points. I mean, are we really close to what happened in the United Kingdom? I mean, think about it for a moment. Where do you think the insurance companies and the pensions invest their money? Stocks and bonds, right? And the mantra on Wall Street for as long as I can remember has been a 60-40 allocation between stocks and bonds. And as you get older, you transition into a larger bond portfolio rather than stock portfolio, because you mitigate the risk into something that returns income. And so many of these pension funds, just like in the United Kingdom, and also retirement accounts, have this allocation. And as rates continue to rise, that is going to I think it's going to lead to ultimately the uncontrolled selling of US bonds, because at some point, the fund managers, the people running the pensions, the people running the back end of the insurance companies, they're going to have to start to sell because they're being eviscerated. And this will create a domino effect that I don't know. I think it turns into a massive turndown in the housing market, and who knows what other economic issues that we will see out of this. But you're already seeing what's happening in the housing market with rates on the, on the federal funds rate just above 2%. The interest on a 30-year mortgage is over 7, and it was 3 a year ago, a year and a half ago. And if we see rates rise commensurate anywhere near what really inflation is at, you're talking easily double-digit plus mortgage rates. And so as those rates rise, the value of the bonds in circulation get hammered. The value of the real estate portfolios get hammered, because as rates rise, money becomes more expensive. Fewer people can afford to buy those properties. And, you know, that's, what do they say? What is the cure for high prices? High prices. The higher the prices go, the fewer people can afford it, the less the demand. It starts to sink to find that X equilibrium in supply and demand. And so the problem is in interest rates, where we have created an illusion of prosperity through low interest rates. And this has created distortions and anomalies in price and misallocations in resource and capital, and it's created distortions in price discovery. And on top of it, we find out a recent survey that says 63% of America, and this was in September, 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And while wages have increased, arguably, certainly they have not increased with rising prices. And this is a big problem as we start to see rates rise even higher. I think we're looking for inflation and real trouble in the economy. That's called stagflation, perhaps even hyperstagflation. Now you throw into the mix the antagonizing of the Saudis, the threat of NOPEC, which is removing the antitrust exemption from OPEC, removing the Patriot missiles from Saudi Arabia at the same time now that there's a threat from Iran to bomb Saudi Arabia. I mean, the whole thing is a powder keg. And I think it's just a matter of time before we start to see some real issues. And something tells me it'll be right after the midterms. They're holding this together with baling wire and bubble gum into the midterms. But I think if the Republicans sweep the House and the Senate, you are going to see some real fireworks where they're going to try to pull out all the stops, blow up the markets, blame it on the Republicans. Just this is time to buckle up. And when most people should be exchanging their dollars for silver and gold, it's never been harder to do it and more costly in terms of premium. And honest to God, I believe you ain't seen anything yet. I truly, truly believe that 2023 shows me no signs of easing up in supply chain issues and or in premium. So if things continue to go the way I think they
Yeah.
will, we're running out of time.
Yeah, I mean, how could premiums go down? The situation's only getting worse. It's going to be harder and harder to find silver, and even looking at spot price might not necessarily go up, but the price you have to pay out of pocket would. A lot of people, like someone, I think it was Ted Butler, talked about $50 silver, and I was like, even if silver doesn't hit $50, the spot price, what you got to pay out of pocket could still be $50. But regardless, producers are turning into the consumers, and the consumers are turning into the producers. The people like you and I that want the silver will be selling it to the people that need the silver. And since they need it and we have it, we could set the price and they have to pay whatever we want. And I think that's going to be happening more and more when big tech comes in. We're talking about Tesla's EV. Like every automobile company by the year 2030 is going to be electric. By that year, in 8 years from now, how are they going to? Where's that silver going to come from? Solar panel demand rose 15% this year. Like, where's that silver going to come from? And I couldn't imagine that mining innovation is going to fix that problem. Recycling, that's wouldn't even put a dent in the amount of silver we'll need. I mean, by the year 2025, if we already exceeded 1.112 billion ounces this year, how many billions of ounces will we need by then? Where, I mean, I don't think that people realize how scarce silver really is when you consider it's a byproduct. Most silver's thrown away. Um, I don't see how this problem won't get exposed soon. You can't sweep it under the rug anymore. You can't. I've been talking about for so many years, but I feel like right now people are finally getting it. Finally, Fox News.
You're totally right about that. You can, and not only is it a massive byproduct of mining other metals like copper, like gold,
Yeah,
like
zinc
um,
and
zinc. It is only 35% of the supply. Only 35% of the supply is coming from primary mining
yeah,
companies, which is a big problem as far as I'm concerned. The big deposits were found a long time ago. But to your point, what makes it so intriguing to me is the fact that you have this growing industrial demand that is finding new applications every day
yes,
in digital and in green. In expansion, you look at the Belt Road Initiative, which is connecting 75% of human population digitally as well, not just with roads and bridges and maritime channels, but digitally. So the need for connection, the need for silver, the need for a continuing growth in silver in this digital world that we live in this green world that we're transitioning to, which I have a feeling on that in a moment. But you also have a monetary demand. And what makes silver so unique is this duality that you
yes.
understand, where maybe that's who's draining Comex. Maybe it is Elon Musk. Maybe it is Sony Corporation. Maybe it is Samsung. Maybe it is, these
That's a good
companies that
point.
realize they're dead in the water without silver. Now, to your point, one other thing, I talk a lot about Saudi Arabia and the moving away from the petrol reserve status, the antagonizing of the Saudis by threatening to remove the antitrust exemption for OPEC, calling it an act of aggression that they don't pump more oil, removing the Patriot missiles from United Arab Emirates and the Saudi border. Um, what you said, think about it. If you're Saudi Arabia, why would you ever want to do anything to help the US at this point? When we are saying by 2030, we will all be green, that all
Right.
auto manufacturers are moving green, and we're destroying their way of life at the same time. And when you talk about them publicly saying we're going to join BRICS last week, making the announcement in South Africa, um, why not?
That's a
That whole 80% of human population, they're happy using the combustion engine.
yeah.
And so you're talking about being on the precipice of some very dirty things. And I think those very dirty things center around the dollar losing its petro status. And when that happens, on top of everything we talked about with the inept and impotent Fed, you lose the petro status, the dollars come rushing home because no longer is OPEC. And every one of those OPEC countries are on the Belt Road Initiative, right? So they're all part of this big coalition, this big group. You remove that, and you see massive spike in inflation and a massive corresponding spike in interest rates. And you have a villain that blows everything up and allows us
That
to
is
come
crazy.
to
That is
be.
crazy to yeah, to add on top of what I've always been talking about. If they could weaponize that, that is crazy to think
Well, and it's
about.
going to happen, and you can see it.
Yeah. And,
And they're
and
all positioning for it. That's why they're all buying gold and silver.
that is crazy. So, and honestly, like besides you and I and like the viewers, like this is not known knowledge besides maybe the people that watched your videos. So I do think it's pretty interesting and important that we can put this type of content out there. Especially for you that's been talking about this so much and eyes have been, finally like Robert Kiyosaki being on the show talking about all this stuff, because I do think it's important for people to know this, especially if you are someone that wants to protect your wealth. I mean, a lot of people, like you said, 63% live paycheck to paycheck. Even if you could put $20 in, once a week, you know, buy a couple ounces here and there, it does add up. And buy from Miles Franklin. I mean, it's a perfect company, if you if you're someone that maybe is struggling financially, even a couple ounces a week or a couple ounces a month definitely does add up fast, and at least you're putting your money into something that holds its value. There is actually a
That
link.
I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
It's also it's also something that the biggest money in the world is accumulating. And the
Oh
reason,
yeah.
you know, I think about this a lot because I've been saying something, of course, it's been evolving the way that I present it, but I've been saying the same thing for over 2 years now. And I'm very consistent. And the reason I'm saying the same thing is that the narrative keeps expanding following the same path. There's no
Yeah.
deviation from it. And you can see it accelerating. You can see this whole script unfolding. And um, when you see something like Fox News talking about those are the crumbs, it's getting real. And I just need people to ask themselves one important question, and that is if price was so determinant of value, then why is the entire system being bled dry? If it were so determinant of value and price were a reflection of supply and demand, the world would be drowning in silver right now. The
Yeah.
world would be drowning in gold. And yet you're seeing the biggest money in the world systematically, quietly, under the cover of price suppression and mainstream rhetoric, run away with all of the global supply. And it's happening. And it's happening in a way that is very concerning to me because it's been very methodical. And it's been happening since 2020 when I started talking about the rise of a group on COMEX called the Others that came out of nowhere. And the group, the Others, is a third group of reportables on the Commitment of Traders report that is believed to be family offices and sovereign wealth funds. And they've been taking distributions and liquidations and deliveries off of the COMEX since 2020 out of nowhere in amounts that equal as much as a decade's worth of deliveries in a single year. Or last week, 5% of all the gold bars delivered off the COMEX in one day, or the month before that, 45% of all the gold kilo bars that the Asians really prefer, 25 million ounces in one day. Who's got this kind of bread? And if a falling price of something, the way it's been falling since March, was indicative of demand and value, then everything would look different than it does.
Yeah.
Instead, price is the ultimate tool of misdirection. And if you don't wake up to realize that the big money doesn't want you to win, the big money wants to paint a narrative that allows you to go the wrong way, to misdirect
Yeah.
you, just like anything that you would ever do where you don't want someone to know what you're doing, you make them think opposite. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what the biggest money in the world is doing. And people need to understand this. And it's accelerating. Where in 1 week since I've been on a show with you, the registered category goes from over 36 million to 34 million. Where did those 2 million ounces go in a week? And what about the metal drained out of SLV? And where is it going? Who's taking it? Why is it happening as the price isn't doing anything?
Right.
And it's going to set up for a massive short squeeze because the managed money is record short. And anyone who would be short in this environment that is rehypothecated 1,800 plus percent, where the silver that is eligible to be delivered if you needed to, is 1,800% rehypothecated. That is an environment that it can bankrupt people, just like it did Bear Stearns. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting final 8 weeks of the year. I think we're going to see some fireworks into December, if I had to guess.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, how many months or years do you really think, this is all going to come crashing down, or when triple digit, I know you've talked about triple digit silver a little bit but like, when do you think silver's quote unquote like explosion is really going to happen? Just for the viewers.
When the dollar loses its world reserve status in a matter of minutes, I think it could happen. When the
Wow.
dollar will always, I suppose, have some sort of reserve status, but when it is challenged for singular world reserve status, or when the Moscow exchange that it's going to open up gains credibility, or when there's a massive short squeeze. There's so many, or when the markets collapse. Or I mean, there's so many things I would have told
Yeah.
you should have happened a long time ago if it
Yeah.
weren't depression of the metal market by the
Oh,
commercial banks.
jeez.
It should be much higher.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, if all you did is take the price of gold right now, which is a suppressed price in and of
Yeah.
itself, and that is 1651, and divide by
Right.
42, well, that's basically 39 bucks. That would be the
Yeah.
average price of the last 200 years. The ratio of
Yeah.
gold and silver is about 42 to 1. You take 1651 and divide by 7, which would be the
Right.
geologic
Yeah.
ratio,
Coming out of the Earth's crust.
230,
That's, yeah.
236.
David
So
Morgan, he has there's a 250 to 1 ratio, calculating all the gold. It's the gold. Man, I need to pull that up. It's incredible. I'm gonna try to pull it up real quick. It's called the
probably the
200.
gold mine to the silver mine,
Yeah, hold
or the
on.
gold above ground to the silver.
Yeah, they multiply, I think it's like $5,000 silver. Hold on. Yeah, it's a 250 to 1 ratio. Yeah, okay. Uh the paper silver market's 250 times the size of the physical. Um So this is they talk about $5 trillion represents the entirety of the paper silver market, including all paper financial products. This makes a 251 ratio. That means every physical ounce of silver, there are 250 ounces of paper silver circulating. And then they do this this math problem that says today the actual size of the silver market, according to Bloomberg's 5 trillion. 5 trillion divided by 20 billion, which is the physical market, equals 250. 250 times 20, which is silver spot price, is $5,000 an ounce. But that then they're saying this is if silver's price were based directly on the real physical market, it would be at 5,000. But we don't live in a perfect world, and obviously, there's a lot of suppression and manipulation, and but I always thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, those are the kind of things that you would use to factor in, your viewpoint on things. You take
Yeah,
various pieces of mathematics, of economics, of logic, realize the suppression, seeing what the biggest money in the world is doing, see the deliveries, put all of it together, and it becomes very easy that there are a lot of people out there that believe it's a hell of an investment and a hell of a thing to own, and they're using suppressed price to accumulate it before the rest of us catch on to it. That I do believe.
yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I think we should start to wrap it up a little bit here. If you did want to buy silver, I recommend going through Miles Franklin. Andy Scheckman is the CEO. There is a link, the bottom left-hand corner, info@milesfranklin.com. Let him know I sent you. Andy would love to hear it. Andy, is there anything you wanted to mention? Um, I
No,
mean,
we're getting close. I keep saying we're getting a lot closer. We're putting the finishing touches on the new website. But until then, continue to send info at Miles Franklin. Say the Slayer sent me. I look forward to coming back and seeing you next week.
yep,
And
yep.
I'm off to Wisconsin tomorrow to see my
Wow.
daughter for a parents' weekend at her sorority. She's a
Oh, that's cool.
freshman at the University of Wisconsin. Excuse me. And other than that, my friend, you stay well, and everyone
Yep,
else out there stay well too. And
yep.
look forward to picking up where we left off next week.
Yep. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is Silver Slayer. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.